welcome to another Rick review. Today I want to talk about a game that isn't out yet, but had a preview this past week if you pre-purchased it. New World. New World is a highly anticipated MMO RPG made by Amazon. So far, Amazon doesn't really have a strong development history, but a lot of people are excited to see what they can do for this industry. As with a lot of MMOs, New World does not have a particularly strong focus on story. The story is always present and helps set up the lore of the world you've entered, but you can choose to ignore it for the most part if you really want to. The basics in this case is that you're an adventurer that's been stranded on this eternal isle, Eternum, where an ancient evil has been rising up and taking over the land. You and others that have been stranded here have to band together, build up, fight this evil, and push it back. Personally, the story really didn't do anything for me. It's kind of cliche and it's very standard. There's a lot of lore stuff that hasn't been explained yet, though, so maybe it'll be added on with the full release and be fleshed out more. For now, though, since the game barely pretends to have a story, I'm only going to give it a 5 out of 10. Visuals are New World's biggest strength. The game looks beautiful. The world they've put you in is mesmerizing, draws you in from the first shot overlooking Eternum as you end the tutorial. The towns are comforting and inviting. The wilds are beautiful during the day, intimidating at night. The corruption that plagues the land looks genuinely terrifying whenever it takes over an area. The spell effects are all very beautifully made. The weapons and armor are unique enough and creative while also fitting the setting, and they feel mostly practical. The lighting effects are some of the best I've seen in an MMO so far and give the atmosphere this added boost. It's not like graphically revolutionary or anything, but for an MMO, it's ahead of its competition in a lot of ways. For that, it's earned itself a solid 9 out of 10. Sound in New World is almost as masterfully crafted as the visuals are. Everything sounds perfect. The smack from your weapons hitting something is very satisfying. The crack through the air when you fire a musket, and the echoes in the mountains when you mine iron are all really immersive. The spells have this impactful and weighty feel to them. The sounds that accompany the crafting make you feel like you're doing something important and not just making iron gloves 75 times in a row. The soundtrack plays in the background nicely without being overbearing or annoying, but it gives this adventurous feel that pulls you deeper into the game. The only issues I really had with the sound was some of them were kind of repetitive, and I would hope that maybe they would make some variance in them later on. But even that is a slight nitpick. Sound in this game is going to get a 9 out of 10 as well. Gameplay in an MMO is by far the most important thing. Because it is an MMO, there's a lot of different aspects to the gameplay that you're going to spend a lot of time in. So for this section of the review, I want to talk about it a little more than usual, and I'm going to break it into multiple parts, which will end up weighting its score a bit heavier than the other sections. But I feel like that's important for an accurate review of an MMORPG. First, let's go over combat. The combat in New World is action focused. It's not very fast paced. There isn't a whole lot of input options for the player. You get 3 abilities, a primary attack, a heavy attack for each weapon, up to 3 weapons. The 3 ability slots left for you to decide can be really fun depending on the weapon that you chose, but also feel a bit limiting as you start wanting to play with the other abilities in that weapon's tree. They also share a cooldown with your other 2 weapons. I think that's an intentional design choice because it makes the gameplay a bit more strategic instead of just spamming abilities, but it can get a bit frustrating at times when you're just spamming basic attacks waiting for the cooldowns of these abilities. There's also a blocking and dodging mechanics, both of which use stamina and seem to follow a Souls-like system. Honestly, these felt really balanced and fun to use for me, especially on a tank character that I made. The combat overall is very simplistic from what I saw, but it still manages to be fun and was what really drew me in. I spent hours grinding mobs and never got bored. Combat gets a 7 out of 10 though, because it has a lot of room to improve with more weapon variety, better abilities, and a tweak to the ability cooldowns. Second, I want to talk about the crafting. Crafting seems to be the aspect of the game that was given the most attention. Almost everything out in the wild is a gatherable resource for you to use for your crafting. All the items you find can be salvaged into crafting materials. The gear that you can craft is generally better than the gear that you find as long as you put in the effort to keep making stuff. And you're not limited to any one profession. You can work on all of them or you can focus on the one that you want. Usually, I don't like MMO crafting and gathering professions. They're tedious and feel unnecessary. But New World manages to make crafting feel rewarding without making you feel like you're grinding forever. The system is simple at first, but it has some complexities that you can hone in on the more you work with it. It actually makes you feel like a bit of an expert in your craft when you start to learn the best way to get what you need and get the best results out of what you have. The system is well designed and rewarding. I think it'll end up being the main draw that keeps players playing this game. I think the crafting here is going to get an easy 10 out of 10. Next, I'm going to go over the questing and exploration in New World. The questing in New World isn't very diverse. It's a lot of kill and loot quests with some side missions that involve exploring an area or collecting a certain amount of resources. Certain quests help progress a town and make you feel a bit of loyalty to one that you've spent a more significant amount of time in. That system is further encouraged by a settlement standing that gives you upgraded stats while in that jurisdiction. You would think the system would discourage you from exploring more, but for me, it actually gave me more reason to go out and see the rest of the world because I wanted to pick a home that was just right for my character. One that had resources that I needed for my professions, a town layout that I liked, maybe a prettier location so I could appreciate the view. The main quest chain also forces you to move around a bit and visit some of these different settlements to progress the story. So I like that it gave you reason to see more of the world, even though the quests were a little repetitive. I still had fun completing them the whole time that I played, so I'm gonna give quests and exploration a 7 out of 10 for now. The last thing to talk about in our gameplay category is group content. Firstly, I want to make a disclaimer and admit that I did not make it to the endgame levels of this game during the preview. There could be more and better group content in the endgame, but personally, I believe MMOs should have group content throughout the experience to allow more gameplay options and to help build familiarity with systems that'll matter at the endgame. That being said, I immediately had issues when trying to do quests in a group. Joining a group does literally nothing to help the questing experience in any way. There's no shared experience, no shared quest progression, nothing. Every one of you has to complete the quest individually and earns nothing for being in a group. The only benefit I could find was that it marks your group member's location on the map. And on top of this, there was never any quests or content that I felt I even needed a group for. Everything in the game up to about level 25 at least was soloable. There was no instance dungeons to group for, and the few boss enemies I encountered were easy enough that you could just solo them if you played carefully. There were corruption events that recommended a group, but you could even do those without grouping up because the shared progression system of the game meant that if you tagged an enemy that somebody else tagged, you also got credit for it. So, group content so far in this game, I'm only going to be able to give a 3 out of 10. I really hope they find a way to improve it though, because that's a major factor in an MMO. After averaging these four scores together, gameplay is going to get a 6.75 out of 10. New World is a beautiful MMORPG that I'm very glad I got the chance to play before its full release. I think it's a good thing that the studio decided to delay it, and I think if they keep putting content into the game after its full launch, it'll have the potential to really last and grow a dedicated player base. I actually bought into the preview because I heard there was a way to refund your purchase on Steam no matter how many hours you put into the preview, but after playing, I decided to keep my pre-purchase. So even though my overall score for New World is a little low at a 7.44 out of 10, I really think it has a lot of potential to be a great game in the future. Thank you for watching my review. If you have any games you would like for me to review later or any critiques about this one, please let me know in the comments.